Eve, you are a really cool person to talk to. I think I'm actually really excited to get to talk to you right now because you have a very, very interesting story, and I don't want to like prime it at all. I want you to like kind of talk about
Okay.
who you are and what you've been up to. So, but let's start from the beginning. Eve, you grew up in a very evangelical environment, and now you're here talking on Truth Wanted, as part of the Atheist Community of Austin. So let's start from the beginning. What was that like?
Yeah, it's a big change. Yeah, so I grew up in an evangelical household. My grandparents and their parents were all evangelical missionaries or pastors. One was like intercessor for Billy Graham. That's my whole background. And my parents became pastors and missionaries when I was about 8 years old. And I was homeschooled my entire life with Christian curriculums, all of it.
So
So
you were deep in the paint is
I was
is how I would describe it,
I was so
right?
deep.
That
Yeah.
that is like evangelicalism in a nutshell, right? Parents are missionaries. You got the homeschool education. I would challenge someone to be more evangelical than that. That's a lot. That's a lot of credentials you got on your resume. I gotta say.
It was pretty, yeah. It was very, I think I'm even learning more and more now as I talk to normal people how evangelical my childhood was. But yeah, it wasn't even, I didn't even know that it could be an option to be anything but that. Like that was my life. At 3 years old, was um, very aware of the concept of hell and very aware of the idea of salvation and constantly, trying to make sure I was saved. I remember at night, like being 4 years old and making sure Jesus was in my heart and that I didn't do anything too bad that day.
Mm,
A lot of OCD tendencies around that as well that I've had
yeah.
to go through therapy for since then. But yeah, extremely evangelical. Then I went on to decide as a teenager, like, well, I need to make this choice for myself, and which really was just me like indoctrinating myself further. Um, Deep dove into all of the youth group stuff. I went to all kinds of different Jesus camp type situations. I was a worship leader. I was
Mm,
told that I was called by God to use my voice for Him. Um, and right around my teen years is when my parents started getting into dominion theology. And they actually call it Seven Mountain theology. My dad wrote several books on it.
hmm.
Uh, and that's the idea that it's basically Christian nationalism. They were supposed to
Yeah.
be involved, yeah, in politics, arts and entertainment, media,
Yeah.
uh,
So
everything.
yeah, just to clarify for viewers who are not familiar with this, the seven, it's not seven pillars, seven peaks, right? Seven peaks,
Seven,
isn't it?
seven mountains. There's seven
Seven
pillars.
mountains,
They
seven
all use
pillars,
different
different
terminology,
things,
but
right? The
same
the
thing.
idea behind this sort of ideology is that Christians should be influencing in all spheres of life, right?
Yes.
And so these seven ideas, I can't remember all the top of my head, but it's politics, it's
Mhm.
education, it's entertainment. It's literally just like everything that we as people just like consume and like live our
Yeah.
lives through. Like, and this idea is, well, Christianity is the correct religion, and it's not only is it supreme, but it's also responsible for literally saving people's lives, right? Like saving people's current lives and then afterlives. And so the idea is that this is a denomination that follows this idea that we should be influencing
Right.
all these things. So a lot of these kinds of groups that you're seeing right now that are influencing the abortion debate right now, a lot of the groups that you see are influencing the education bills going on in this country. Like that's because some of those groups that are funding this are from these churches that have this theology. So it's wild. You don't like people outside the United States might find that surprising, but it's a very critical part of U.S. politics, and it has been like a very important base for a number of years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's big. And literally they have like ministry schools for it and they train you, and
Yeah.
so that's what I was trained in, was to be an influencer,
Mm-hmm.
ironically enough. And uh that was my goal in life, was to like influence the world, to take on the qualities of the kingdom so that we could bring the kingdom to earth.
Right. Mm.
Uh
So you grew up in this environment, and like at some point you're starting to think, well, maybe not all this is actually true, right? What age did you start having these thoughts?
I think the doubts were there all along. I'm a
Mm,
super critical thinker in every other area of my life. And I think they were there. And I would ask questions and then I would be given like a very generic answer, the ones we're all used to hearing, like from apologists and stuff. Um, and I was too afraid to stop believing. So I just didn't go very deep with it.
mm,
Um, I went through a really traumatic purity culture marriage is what I call it
mm,
at 19, and then a very traumatic divorce, and the way that the church treated me throughout that, and um, it had me really questioning a lot about Christianity, but I was determined to still continue in my relationship with God. So
yeah.
I continued. I moved forward in life. I ended up going to Bethel's Supernatural School of Ministry, which
Yes. In this, and by okay, just to point out, you and I were in a group chat with some other people, and the moment you said you were part of the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, I think was when I was like, I need to invite this person on my show.
Yeah, it's as weird as it sounds.
Mm,
It I only lasted 6 months and I was an atheist,
mm,
which was mostly actually because they really do allow for you to ask a lot of questions and you start learning more and more. And the things they teach are so freaking bizarre that you have to start questioning things if you
sure.
at all have critical thinking skills. So,
That makes sense. Yeah, you kind of
yeah,
get the most you get like again deep in the paint, right? You're like
yes.
right there. You see the bear like this is what we really think about the world and how it operates. And then
Totally.
yeah, it doesn't get any deeper than that, right? Like you're at the
Right.
base.
Well, and I
Interesting.
started going there right when Trump got elected. And that
Mm,
was a huge turning point for me because my parents' ministry went from being a very progressive voice. They were some of the first white evangelicals to speak in favor of Black Lives Matter movement, which was a big deal in amongst my dad's peers.
interesting.
My mom, I remember her celebrating the Marriage Equality Act passing, stuff like that. And then as soon as Trump came on the scene, it just went downhill from there. They suddenly changed up on everything.
Yeah. So, like, again, speaking, the Atheist Community of Austin is a 501c
Yeah,
nonprofit.
sorry.
We C3 nonprofit, right? We can't endorse political candidates, but it is just an absolute fact. If you look at, I believe Gallup polls have talked about this, Pew Research polls have talked about this. This is an empirical fact. One of the biggest predictors of the 2016 Trump election was if you were evangelical or not.
Yep.
If you were evangelical, you were almost I don't know what the percentage was, but it was higher than every single other kind of religious denomination in this country to vote for Trump. And for some people, that might be surprising. But did you find that surprising growing up in that culture?
Yeah, I remember being really taken aback by it because we had all like kind of been progressing our views.
Mm,
Um, I remember thinking like, "Wait, what?" But then that caused me to look at the history of evangelicalism, and it was totally on brand. And it
mm,
was absolutely matched the values that evangelicalism holds. It didn't match the values that I thought Jesus had, but that's
yeah.
how I figured out evangelical values and Jesus values are very different.
Yeah, that's like, I last week when I was live, I described my upbringing as evangelical, and it was in a way. I was a part of an evangelical group on campus, but I don't know if my personal theology always matched that. Like
Right.
to me, Jesus was always somebody who advocated for the poor, wanted you to be like generally nice to people. Was an immigrant himself, so probably like pro on those issues, but like you take the political theater that was going on at that time under that candidacy did not really match up with that theology. So I don't. So it seemed like to me there was this shift of, well, this is our guy, and we have to kind of go with what he says. Yeah, he talks about grabbing women in places, but like oh hey, David was a sinner too. Like there's this,
Right.
you kind of come up with these narratives to kind of justify the base. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there was that tie there?
I think it gave a lot of evangelicals validity in some of their bigotry,
Mm,
and it let them hold on to beliefs that society has been progressing past in the
Mm.
last few decades. It was like like after having more progressive political leaders, it was like, wait, we can go back. We don't have to keep moving the
Yeah. It's
needle.
like, hey, yeah, we don't have to pick the moderate guy anymore. We can just be
Right.
mask off about some
Yeah,
of this stuff. Yeah, and not be
totally.
afraid. I think
Yeah,
that's a great point.
that was a big thing. And that's what I saw, at least amongst, the leaders and stuff that I was around. And they quite literally, I remember being at Bethel School of Ministry, and one of the days they had an entire worship service in Trump's honor where they were literally like worshiping Trump. It
Yeah.
was bizarre.
That man, I don't have this is today is about you, Eve, but one day I'm gonna tell some stories about some people I knew that were really into Bethel, because Bethel's a whole other thing, man. You could talk a long time about the Bethel ministry and what that's accomplished and what they've done, I guess. I don't know about accomplished, because accomplished kind of implies that like something good was done. I don't think it was all good. But anyway, so going back to your story, so you've gone through the Bethel Supernatural Ministry School. Very cool. You've grown up in this life. You have parents that are deeply in the ministry, and other family too. So you're now, you've always had these kind of thoughts, but now, especially with the presidency going on, you're kind of turning the other way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also, I was in my mid-20s. I think it was just a natural progression of like figuring out the world around me and learning,
Sure.
about other religions for the first time in my life, and learning about the Bible in ways that I had never learned about it before, because I was in ministry school. So I was studying the Bible in depth. I was
Right.
preaching out of it. I was leading worship. And between like personal experiences and then studying and learning more, I began to become less and less convinced of evangelicalism specifically. And then
Sure.
I finally hit a rock bottom personally, where I was like, I just have to cut down to the bottom line question. Is there a God or not? Do I think there's a God? And my conclusion at the end of that, quite literally like dark night of the soul, like I stayed up all night kind of processing this question,
Yeah.
was I don't have any reasons to believe there's a God. And as
Mm.
soon as I reached that conclusion, I felt the biggest weight leave my shoulders. I mean, I felt more free. It was like everything I had been told I would feel as a Christian, the peace, the joy, all of that, just kind of settled in. And I was like, wait, has this been the root of a lot of my issues?
That's the answer to that being probably yeah.
Yeah. As my
Man.
therapist has helped me figure it out since then, yeah, that it was.
Wow. Okay, so you've figured this out for yourself. And about how old are you at this time?
It was right around my birthday. I was turning 26.
Okay.
And so, and I was married, I was remarried at the time. And that was another thing that was going on. That was a really dark part of my life that was not healthy. It was based on evangelical standards for marriage and all of that.
Yeah. And I'm sure yeah, there's
Not
probably a
good.
lot of things to be said about that as well. So you're
Yeah.
26 and then you've kind of figured this out. So do you talk to people about it? Do you consult apologetics? Do you what's your strategy here?
I had been all along, like for the
Okay.
past few months, I had been talking to my pastors. I had been watching every debate. I had been trying to convince myself up until that night. And at that point, I was like, hold on.
Hmm.
And then once I knew, I'm very much a person where once I like reach a conclusion, I'm pretty sold on it.
Sure.
Uh, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm supposed to be leading worship this week, and I don't believe that there's even a God. And I also think this is wrong. And I think it's manipulation and all this stuff. So I packed one suitcase and I got a one-way flight to the other side of the country, called some old friends and asked if I could stay on their couch. And I left, and
Wow.
I never went back.
Wow, you just dipped. You said, peace out. See you later. See you on the other side, maybe, and
Right.
just left. Wow. So that's a really intense breakup with a religion you've spent your entire life
Yeah,
doing, like maybe not actively believing at all times, but at least going through the motions for, right? Like
for sure.
you physically have committed to this thing. Because I would frame my experience similar to yours, Eve, in that you're kind of sometimes physically and mentally out, especially towards the
Yep.
end there, right? Like you kind of feel like, well, in order to kind of do my obligation towards faith, I have to lead the ministry, do these Bible studies, do X, Y, and Z. Because there's definitely, at least for evangelical Christianity, there's like this checklist component of
For
this is what
sure.
you need to do in order to, one, be a good person, but also like in their eyes, right? But also like keep up with the status quo. It's a lot of like keeping up with the Joneses there. So
Totally.
you completely left, and you just started going on TikTok, or what did that look like?
Yeah, no, I definitely disappeared for a few years and I was like, oh, I can just exist. I can
Yeah,
just be,
you
and
can
I
just
don't have
be.
to.
That's true.
Right.
You don't have to talk about it. You can just kind of live your life too. That's also a valid option. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what my plan was. I was so happy to do that because my parents have a ministry that's very public, and my siblings all work for them full time. So they're like, that was my whole life, was just constantly doing and not getting to be. And so it was really nice to sit back and be and figure out, what do I believe, and um, what are my values as a human and all of that.
Right.
And then I've always been like outspoken, and especially about political views. And so on Facebook, I would still be posting some stuff here and there just for like friends and family. I didn't have a following or anything. And then the insurrection happened, and I was like, I can't be quiet anymore. Like, I know what this is caused by.
Right.
I know
Mm.
people that were there. Like, this is a direct result of Christian nationalism.
Yes. I'm glad you said that, because I have talked to other Christians about this particular issue, and I've
Mhm.
said, look at the flags that are at this event. You see the crosses. Listen to the people who were there and look at the circles they encompass. This is a Christian thing. Like,
Yep.
maybe this isn't your particular brand of Christianity, but
Right.
this is a Christian movement in part. It's also a QAnon movement and other things. But like
And
that,
QAnon was
yeah,
that was a big part of my family got deep into QAnon.
oh my
They
goodness,
and they
really?
still are. And Bethel is very much steeped in QAnon. Sean Foyt comes out of that. It's all heavily steeped in QAnon beliefs.
Yeah, yeah, and but the responses I got from people when talking to that is, well, one, they're saying, oh, these are actually, this is actually a setup. That these are actually leftists. This was Antifa that was at this event, which is crazy because it's like you have people that were there,
Right.
like you were there, and you're talking about it. You're like, yeah, everyone else is Antifa. Like what? But also, like, it's just this. I see this pattern, Eve, where it's this doing this terrible, awful thing, and then it's denying that it ever happened, or denying that it's a part of what you do. But it just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing this sort of Overton window of action. And the evangelical Christian movement, today, I would say, is almost unrecognizable to the one maybe 15, 20 years ago. In my opinion, what do you think?
Kind of, but also if you go back and look at like when Bush was in the White House, I don't
Mm.
know. I think there's still a lot of similarities there. Um,
Yeah, I agree that, like, I think probably ideologically it's still the same.
right,
I
right.
think they're just more like mask off about it right now.
Oh, for sure. You're
Right?
right
It's
about
like
that.
I think like people are much more open about their bigotry, much more open about their nationalism, that what they want to happen, and they're not as afraid of the consequences as being seen as the kooky Christian anymore, because
Right.
it's just become more accepted, which is
Absolutely.
interesting. So
Well, yeah, and
yeah, go
that's
ahead.
why I started to get vocal again,
Yeah.
and I made my Facebook public, and I started reaching more people, and my posts were getting sent around, and then people were copying and pasting them and posting them on my family's ministries posts, like in direct retaliation to what they were saying,
Mm.
and that obviously caused a lot of family tension.
Sure. Yeah. It would be
So I
weird if it didn't, right?
Right,
Yeah.
totally, it did, and it got to the point where I was like, I don't wanna do this. I don't wanna fight against my family in order to speak out and be myself, and then I realized that was silly too. I need to be able to, have my voice, and my story is valid, and I can talk about these things in a way that isn't disrespectful. Um, so I decided, I was like, "I'll try TikTok." I've been sitting around during quarantine just, like, watching videos about how to make whipped coffee, so I might as well
Yeah.
make one myself. And I did, and I was shocked that it caught on. It was really just supposed to be a way for me to like uh, get some relief and get my story off my chest, but I ended up finding a whole community there.
Yeah, it's so for those who aren't on TikTok and aren't aware, there is a blossoming ex-evangelical community on
Yeah.
TikTok, which I'm thankful for, but also surprises me because TikTok is also filled with the most awful propaganda and the most like
It's so bad.
the most awful things you can fit into 1 minute is all there, right? All the
Sometimes
tricks
15 seconds.
or 15 seconds even, right? As much fake news and persuasive tactics you can use, like it's all in there, and it's by people who are either promoting their own crappy businesses or just conspiracy theories and other BS. So and that's where you've been doing that stuff on there. You've been part of that community. Now that you are more popular, I would say, more known, does your family ever talk to you about that? Do they ever like say, "Hey, what's up with that?" You know?
No, they don't like to bring it up. I probably
Mm,
bring it up more than they would even like for me to, because I get excited about something and I'll try to find a way to talk about it to
yeah,
connect with them. I got to speak on a panel at the Atheist Convention and stuff like that that I get excited to share about, but
yeah,
obviously that's not exciting for
right,
them.
right.
So yeah, we don't it's kind of like a boundary that we have now. We don't talk about politics or religion.
Mm.
And that doesn't leave a whole lot for us to talk about because of the way their life is 100% politics and religion. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to be a practicing Christian, right? You go into church every Sunday, maybe you're part of a Bible study group, but it's another thing
yeah,
to have your career in there too,
right,
right? I mean,
right.
I can't imagine what that must be like. It's one, growing up with that pressure, but also just coming to that reality where it's like they would have to radically change their entire lives in order
Yep,
for them to even accept a modicum of the conclusions that you've come to now. And
absolutely.
I've realized that for my family. I've realized that for people I know who are really deep in that culture. And that makes it really tough. But like now that you're on the other side, and you're kind of speaking to people, what's your goal in all this? What do you want to do? What do you hope to accomplish?
My I mostly have two goals. One is to be a voice that validates people that are going through questioning, even if they don't reach the same conclusions that I reach. I want to be a voice that makes them feel safe to ask those questions. I want to be a place where they are also inspired by critical thinking.
Mm,
Um, I remember when I was deep in evangelicalism, there was an atheist content creator that somehow I followed on Facebook. It was like a friend of a friend from high school, and he would post the most offensive memes, the most aggressive atheist stuff. But
yeah,
those little seeds got planted. And I remember
yeah,
being like, oh, haha, this doesn't bother me. Like, poor guy. But that made an impact and really helped spark some important questions that I would go on to ask someday. So, yeah, just being a safe place, a validating voice, and someone that sparks some questions for people.
absolutely. We're going to take some calls in a second, but one thing I just want to add before we move on is I like that you added that you want to be a safe space for people, because we often talk a lot about, oh, we want people to start thinking critically, asking questions, stuff like that. And that's great. But the culture that you and I sort of shared in a way, Eve, I would say, and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, was not a safe space for questioning.
Right. Not at
Right?
all.
Like they pretend like it is sometimes. They say,
If you
"Oh,
stick
you
to the script, it's fine.
if you stick to the script and if you ask the right questions, like how much does Jesus love me actually, like that, that kind of stuff is fine. But when you really get into the nitty gritty, like, so how come the Gospel of John isn't dated until 80 CE or whatever, right? Like what's up with this? Is this an eyewitness testimony? You get into that stuff and you either get no answer, you get, oh, this is great for another time,
Mhm.
or you get into the hard apologetics, if you know someone who's knowledgeable with that, and at that point it becomes like debate territory, right? It doesn't
Totally.
become a question. So I like the idea, and I have always tried to promote this to be a similar space where people can feel safe to ask those questions, because I definitely did not feel safe in asking questions in those spaces.